One of the things we talked about also is that setting that intention, setting that purpose. Our brains cannot process all this information. We can only see 1% of our visual environment. It's incredible. So our brain needs to decide what's important or what's not.
If you aren't someone that is as aware as maybe others in your life, just start asking yourself questions like, where did this come from? Where did this belief arise? I often will say to people too, what we're doing a lot of time is we're fighting for our limitations instead of fighting for possibilities.
Set a goal of intention, of action, of health with identity change. Plug that into the subconscious. 95% of your life is subconscious decisions, behaviors, and actions. So one of the things that triggered me to learn about the subconscious brain is something that happened to me a few years ago.
Welcome back to the Manifested Podcast with Kathleen Cameron. Today we have Dr. Stephen Resnick back, and we're going to talk about some of his personal manifestation stories and how he uses the power of the mind and his programming to manifest some beautiful things in his life. So welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
People love to hear personal manifestation stories. So I would love for you to share, maybe tell us one of your top manifestations and how you brought it into the physical form.
I didn't know about manifestation until certain things came in my life. And when I started to hear what you meant by manifestation, about embodiment, I didn't even know what embodiment was. And then I realized that I manifested many things in my life. One of the manifestations that I had, I remember years ago, we were at a fundraiser party, and being in Miami, there's water and I love boats. And I saw out there was these brand new boats out there, and I looked at about 4 or 5 boats that were out on the water, and I looked at my wife and I said, God, that boat is incredible. I want that boat. And I kind of looked at it at that time. I was at medical school. I couldn't afford a boat. And I said, you know what? Let's go on that boat. And I went on that boat and I sat on the boat. I felt the wood on the boat. I held the steering wheel on the boat. And I was like, God, I could see myself being on this boat. So years later, I bought that boat. It was just a 30-foot size boat. It was a smaller version of that boat, and I found it very easily. It just came to me. And then about 2-3 years later, I said, I want to get the 40-foot. So I went to get the 40-foot boat, and it came just like that. It happened to be a doctor that was selling his boat because his new wife didn't like the water at all. And she didn't want her hair to get whatever it is. And so I called, and the first phone call that he got was from me, and it was the first day that boat came out. And then I said to myself, that's strange, maybe that's coincidental. And I'm saying, I don't think so. I think my subconscious, and I've been looking for boats probably under my level of consciousness on the internet, but never became aware of it, just because I put 2 and 2 together. So then after that 40-foot, I ended up getting a 55-foot boat. And that boat came on the first day that it was out in the market. And I said, what a coincidence. Oh my God. I know it was not a coincidence because I set that intention. I set that in my background. I set that as a goal. I wanted it. I knew I was going to get it. And that's the thing about that subconscious brain, is that the subconscious loves imagination. It doesn't know what's happening now versus what's happening in the future, because what's going to happen, it wants to know now, actually. So when you're in an image and you set that image and you embody that with your senses, see, that's about the brain. The brain is an experience of consciousness, is what? It's all your senses coming together. Tactile, smell, whatever it is, olfactory, smell, taste, hearing it, feeling it. That gets wired into your subconscious, right? And then that easily gets put out into your attention, because what you're doing is you're setting out that goal. And how does this help in my life? That's one thing. I just see it. And as far as like health, what I tell my patients is, they say, a lot of some of my patients say I have brain fog. I can't think well. I can't concentrate. I have bad attention. What I visualize it, I said, that computer system when it's just running slow, and you hit that central alternate delete button, and that task manager comes out, and all those programs that are going on in the background, if your programs in the background are, I'm not good enough, and so, and it's also, all of these things, the modern day stressors that are just plugging your brain up. Your brain doesn't work efficiently. Set a goal of intention, of action, of health with identity change. Plug that into the subconscious, right? So then wherever you go, because remember I told you, 95% of your life is subconscious decisions, behaviors, and actions. So why are we focusing on our 5% consciousness? Because consciousness is that part of the brain, that new part of the brain that will select and plug those things out. It's the director. But the subconscious is so much stronger. So that's why I talk about habits and automated behavior and manifestation of your health or whatever it is, because that just plugs into your subconsciousness and then your consciousness becomes aware of it. Now there's these networks, which I'm not going to get into. There's a default mode network, there's a salience network, there's an attention network. Okay, so we're going to talk about neurology, about manifestation, is that the salience network is this network from your prefrontal cortex all the way back to your parietal cortex that tells you what's important, what you're going to value. Then you have a default mode network, which is your default system, which is this network that is ruminating or thinking from the past and the future, and that's where you're daydreaming. So the default network is your default system. Your salience network is telling you what is important. And within that salience network is an attention network. So what it does is it plugs what you need to have attention to, what you're value tagging, what you need to bring into your attention. And then you have this central executive network, which is then it says, okay, we're going to execute. And then that is more at your conscious level. That's more of your prefrontal cortex. So that's the thing about our brains, is that we have like two systems running. We have your subconscious system and your consciousness system, and then you have your rational and your irrational system. And that's the whole idea about running it slowly. And the way you coach and the way you decide, you make it easily flow. Mm-hmm. And that's how you manifest.
Yeah, I make it really simple when I'm teaching it.
Yes.
So when you were talking about the computer programs,
yes,
I heard somebody say once about how, when the computer comes up and says, it's time for an upgrade.
Yes.
And then we say snooze later, and then it pops back up, it's time for an upgrade, snooze later. The more that we do that, the more we slow down, the foggier we get, the slower the computer runs, until one day you have to sit down, you have to be quiet, and you have to let the software update happen. And that takes time. It might be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 hours, but you have to take the time to stop, to let that program actually, like that software upgrade. So to me, that's where stillness came from. That's where the spirituality or the present moment came from, is let's stop ignoring the need for that upgrade and actually allow it to be true, and let us take the time to do that.
And what you did right there and what I did is that metaphor. See, the brain and the subconscious actually accepts a lot of metaphors.
Yeah.
And when you plug in a metaphor and be like, that explains it. Oh, I understand that. You're bringing that out of your subconscious into your consciousness. That's why you want to, there's a connection there. But we focus so much on consciousness, and when you consciously fight to do things or make excuses, you're not going to be able to get into the subconscious. And a lot of the things we talk about is looking back at those programs and taking out the viruses and putting in the new updated version.
I often will say to people too, what we're doing a lot of time is we're fighting for our limitations instead of fighting for possibilities. So that's a major shift that I did in my subconscious, is now it is habitual for me to look for possibility instead of limitation, where I used to just look for limitation.
And that's the thing, and that's what you're saying, is like when you're coaching and you're doing that, you're saying possibilities, because when the brain is automated, it doesn't look at it. Because like when I have a patient in the office and I say, okay, if you're not going to do this, what are you going to do instead? They're like, whoa, I never thought about that, what I'd do instead, right?
Yep.
Because they do the same thing over and over again. And you're teaching mindfulness in your way, in the manifestation way, which helps a lot of people.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And your story about the boat, one thing that I noticed, just an observation, you were in medical school and you saw this boat and you thought to yourself, oh, I want that boat and one day I will have it. Then you decided to get on it and feel what it felt like, right? And then obviously the patterning and the programming led you to the realization of it. But where I find with most people is they'll see that boat and they'll say, I want it. And then it has a sponsoring thought that says, but I'll never have it. So they won't even go on it. They wouldn't have that next thought to, why don't I sit on it? Why don't I feel the wood? Maybe I'll even go for a drive. So What is it about you that you knew within your mind that, yes, one day I will have that? Like, what was the shift?
Okay, because I challenge my beliefs, right? And what people say that you can't have and what is right or so is a belief that society has implemented and restricted you. And my belief was I knew I was going to get it. I knew I was going to get it. I felt it. And looking back again is like you realize it at the end, at the reward. You don't realize it through the process. And it's like, oh, that's what happened. Or, oh, that explains it. And I'm sure you see that in your manifestation. So what makes me different is my ability to change and my mindset. I have a growth mindset. And unfortunately, some people have a limited mindset. And my brain and my growth is constantly learning and learning my experiences and looking at my beliefs and challenging them constantly. And that's what I do with my patients. Patients telling you, there are limitations of what they've been told. And as like I did with my practice, is that as a doctor, I was told to practice a certain way. And I challenged that belief and I changed it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And we will just keep doing things because we were taught to do them that way and never question. So for me, it's curiosity. It's being inquisitive, asking yourself questions. I often will ask, like, well, according to who? Like, where did that actually come from? Like, is that actually truth? Or it's just what I'm making true by believing in it? And so I'm always asking those questions. So I would suggest as a first point, if you aren't someone that is as aware as maybe others in your life, just start asking yourself questions like, where did this come from? Where did this belief arise? There's this really funny story, and I'll tell it, about a ham and like this family that they made this, like, every Christmas they make this beautiful, sugary, delicious maple ham. And the recipe has gone from generation to generation to generation, and everybody just follows it. And this one little girl asked one day, why are we cutting the ends off the ham? They take the ham, they cut the ends off, they put it in the oven, they put the sugar on, it cooks for this long. She says, why did we cut the ends off the ham? Her mother was like, actually, I don't know. Let's ask their grandmother. And then ask the grandmother. She's like, I don't know. So then they go ask the great grandmother, who's like 96 years old, sitting in the chair, why do we cut the ends off the ham? And she said, well, the pan that I had, it didn't fit, so I had to cut the ends off. So we just keep doing things because it's the way. So that little girl asked the question finally, to realize that we don't need to throw out pieces of the ham. We can actually just keep it and cook it in whatever pan we want. And so to me, I call it loosening the model, just to loosen that model a little bit and to be inquisitive.
Let me ask you a question. So the thing about manifestation, it seems to me also that when you achieve that goal, are you aware of the process of achieving that goal? Or does it happen afterwards, or your brain starts to realize, or you realize that you achieved that goal?
What is so beautiful, quote that I heard is that you never know that you're in a quantum leap until the quantum leap has happened. So in that moment while you're leaping, you can see signs of land, you can potentially feel it. But the confirmation, the physical observed confirmation of the manifestation, the mind won't fully accept it until you see it. So once the goal is achieved, you can say, okay, goal is achieved. But what most people don't realize is that the actual sponsoring thought or the creation of that goal observed in the physical 3D world happened way before the moment where it's going to show up. And so planting the seed in the subconscious mind is actually the beginning of all creation. It's the womb of creation. So people are automatically, though, manifesting and realizing. So the first thing I'll teach people is, hey, do you see how you manifested that car accident the other day? Did you see how you manifested this physical ailment today? Do you see how you're manifesting your child showing up in this way today? And I'll actually show them the process of how they're currently already manifesting. And then I'm like, okay, let's now reverse engineer it. Like, let's actually set it on purpose.
And what I see in my office and I see in my patients is that they are manifesting certain things a part of their health. And it so happens that they have so many conditions. And oh my God, I have this autoimmune condition. Oh my God, I got this condition. Now I have cancer, whatever it is. And I'm not saying it's a negativity that's causing that, but there is an energy and there's a manifestation of their health. And I talk about this with epigenetics, is that we're emotional beings. If we hold, repress, suppress emotions, that is a problem because our genes turn on and off and our increased likelihood of getting diseases and conditions becomes higher. It's not the cause, it becomes higher. And that is something that is very big in my practice as well. And that's why it's important to manifest health. through all the things that we talked about.
Yeah, I call that like collective conditioning, patterning and programs in the subconscious mind that are creating illness without you even knowing it. So it's not like I'm sitting here today going, oh, I'm such a negative person and all of my negative thoughts are manifesting my physical ailments. But the collective consciousness as a whole tends to strive to the experience of fear and conflict and negativity. And so we are subjected to that. It becomes natural without us even realizing it. And then, yes, we are manifesting essentially from the collective consciousness a negative physical individual experience.
And then one of the things we talked about also is that setting that intention, setting that purpose. Because when you set an intention and purpose, you plug that in there. And then, because this is what I highlight, is the subconscious is constantly working, constantly. And our brains cannot process all this information. We can only see 1% of our visual environment. It's incredible. You know, we can't process all this information. So our brain needs to decide what's important or what's not. And if it's prioritizing negativity, if it's prioritizing all of these limited beliefs, it will constantly go to that to confirm it, where it's confirming the bias, confirming the negativity, because our brains are wired for protection. And you got to look at that as an efficiency system. You got to change that efficiency. You got to change. The word is change. The change, though, is not hard work. It's just becoming mindful and looking at those different programs.
Yeah, it's a shift in perspective and perception for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that triggered me to learn about the subconscious brain is something that happened to me a few years ago. I was at home. I was preparing myself to go to work, and I got a call about a patient that was having epilepsy, or what we call status epilepticus, which is continuous seizures for more than 15 minutes. So they call me on the phone that the patient is having seizures. What are you going to give the patient? I said, look, you gave so many drugs already. I need to run and see the patient. I run over there and I see the patient, and I walk in there, and there's a group of nurses and therapists in the room around the patient, okay? I get to the patient, and the nurse comes right up to me and says, what are you going to give the patient? And I said, hold on, I'm just going to give the patient love. And I was like, I'm telling you right now, it is not something that I would have said. And I walk over to the patient, and I see the movements, and I look at the type of movements, and I'm like, this doesn't look like epilepsy. It could be what we call pseudo seizures or false seizures. So one of the nurses says, you got to see this video of the seizures. Brings me the video, and I'm looking at the video, and close up, the patient has a tattoo that says ahava, which in Hebrew means love. And I said, holy mackerel. I said, why would I walk in the room and say love? I mean, I'm already thinking about what drugs to give the patient, what the seizures. My brain, no question, scanned the room, saw that tattoo, but did not come conscious of it. And that's what people don't understand, that our brains are constantly scanning the environment under a level of consciousness. I saw that. And when I started to look at my patients who have strokes, they lose vision on a completely visual field that's completely off. They can't see. I say 2 fingers, 1 finger, they can't see it. Their brains don't have a black spot. Actually, what happens is the brain consciously fills in that space. I said 2 fingers, 1 finger, they can't see it. But if we took a tool, like a hammer or a screwdriver, and then brought that in front of the patient and said, we flashed this thing, what do you think what you saw? They would pick the right tool every single time. They couldn't consciously see it, but something saw it. That's what I'm talking about. Your subconscious is on 24 hours a day in your sleep throughout the whole entire day. That is why when you set an intention, and that's why you set a manifestation, a purpose or goal, that brain will value tag that and will constantly gravitate towards that. And that's when I started to say, man, I really believe in this subconscious.
Yeah.
I really do.
Oh, I love this, Dr. Steve. Such a beautiful conversation. We could talk for days and days,
Yes,
I'm sure, about all this material. Thank you for sharing
Thank you.
personal manifestation story with us in the boat and a little bit of your thoughts about manifestation. I am so grateful to have you here and to have this conversation. And when you're talking about the brain and how much information it can process and the importance of negativity versus positivity and limitation versus empowerment, I just want to remind you all that the limit does not exist.